But it's the Christian community that a lot of Christians are willing to contemplate the UFO phenomenon and aliens inside of a Nephilim, fallen angel / demon paradigm. Because there's a lot of guys out there who don't really know anything about ufology who are saying that this whole thing is just demons, a masquerade of demons. But as soon as you have crash retrievals in bodies, that explanation doesn't work anymore.
The government hiding UFOs and Christians are disturbingly having a difficult time with this? What is going on? Timothy Alberino explains his thoughts on why Christians, nonetheless, are having a hard time with this UFO problem. And it all revolves around whether or not UFOs are demons or some other spiritual entity. So we're going to be diving into this. I saw this and I thought this was absolutely fascinating. And I know that you guys will think this is fascinating too. So let's get into it. Shout out to the Blurry Creatures podcast. I'll have the entire video in the description below.
Christians are having a really hard time with this stuff.
Yeah.
They really are. And all I did was review the film. And I know Lou Elizondo. He's a friend of mine. And I've been involved in this topic, embedded in this topic for quite some time now. And I know some of the players who were involved at the governmental level. And it's kind of frustrating to me to see all the denial. Because I don't really get confronted. Let me back up. Age of Disclosure was a very well-produced film, and it was very sequential. And I think they made probably the strongest case that I've ever seen in a film, in a documentary film. They proved conclusively, I think, that the crash retrieval program is real, that the phenomenon is real. And you had, intelligence community guys, people who've never spoken up before, who've come forward in this film. And it's very difficult to rationally deny the reality of this situation.
Yeah, I don't get the denial part, like to say all of that is a hoax. No, you don't have to say everything is 100% true or you know exactly what it is, but there's some things that we just don't understand, and that's okay.
So I didn't think, again, having watched Age of Disclosure and doing a review, I didn't think there was anything really controversial about it. And if you look at the UFO community, like UFO Twitter, there is really no controversy there about the film. Most people applauded the film. It was well done and compelling. Although you have your group out there, let's call it the secular UFO community. You have a portion of this community that is going to reject anything that comes from Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton and David Grush and any of those kind of people just because of their association with the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody says you can't trust Lou Elizondo because he was a counterintelligence agent. Well, people don't understand what counterintelligence is. Counterintelligence is gathering information. You're finding out what the enemy knows about your operations. That's counterintelligence. You go in there and you find out what the enemy knows. It's not creating lies and deceiving the American people. That's not what counterintelligence is.
To be honest, if I've never heard about that, I would think that counterintelligence means we're gonna counter the truth with a lie, to be fair.
And people think that because Lou worked in counterintelligence, that anything coming from Elizondo or his group is deception, is government deception. And it's just not accurate. It's just not accurate at all. So there's nothing really new revealed in the film. It concretizes what we already know about disclosure, about the phenomenon and the legacy reverse engineering program. But it does it in a way that is, I would say, indisputable because of the figures that they have, the personalities.
What level of knowledge would you suggest that the viewer would have to have on the subject?
They made the film in such a way that you can be completely green. You can be going into this not knowing anything. They did a really good job with that. So the UFO community, the secular UFO community, was either not too impressed because they're already informed of a lot of this, or they're just Lou Elizondo haters and they just reject the whole thing out of hand because it's coming from the government, which is not true. But it's the Christian community that kind of having a fit about this thing.
Before he goes into the Christian fit, which is, I guess, understandable, but also not really. And we're going to tackle both sides. In my opinion, if the government is coming out with something, like admitting something is happening, I think for me, that just proves that this is actually reality now. This is something that we have to be aware of.
Because a lot of Christians are willing to contemplate the UFO phenomenon and aliens inside of a Nephilim / fallen angel / demon paradigm.
Yep.
But unfortunately for these people, the realities of a legacy crash retrieval program, because they talked about bodies in this film. They also talked about the Collins Elite. And the Collins Elite is a group of evangelical Christians at the Pentagon and in the intelligence community who are actively discouraging disclosure and to some extent impeding it, because they believe that this whole phenomenon is just a gigantic deception and we shouldn't look at it or be interested in.
It's weird because when I think about that, there's not a problem looking into things. It's not like you're participating in like a Ouija board or something, or praying to God or selling your soul. You know, like there's differences between participating in something and looking into something. Like if there's a demon possessed person and someone comes to me to go pray over that person, I'm not gonna run away. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I can't look, it's a demon, or whatever you might think it is. I might investigate. And that's okay.
They're just trying to shield our eyes from it.
Right.
You know, like if you're sitting, like my dad used to do to me, we'd be watching TV and some commercial would come out with girls in bikinis and he'd put his hand over my eyes. Or tell us to put our hands over our eyes. That's what the Collins Elite is trying to do.
It's like the Doublemint commercials from the 80s where they had the twins. They're like, don't look at this.
Well, that sounds like Genesis 6. You know, that's kind of what they did back in the day.
Well,
they don't want to look at that either.
You can conceptualize the phenomenon in that way. You guys can, but a lot of other people can't. They're having a real hard time. So they can't. I encounter a lot of Christians who will say, yeah, it's like Genesis 6, but as soon as you introduce into this scenario functional technology and biologicals, you have a problem. We've talked about this a lot of times on the show, because you can't reverse engineer spiritual, supernatural technology.
I was more saying like Genesis 6, most of the church wanted to reject that narrative.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
And most Christians probably want to reject the UFO alien
I see what
narrative.
you're saying.
But the problem is Nephilim are in the Bible. Sons of God are in the Bible. Spiritual beings are in the Bible. UFOs or aliens are not necessarily that. But he's going to make a case saying these spiritual beings, angels, whatever you want to call them, are alien. Whatever, not human, are alien. And it's a very interesting point.
But I'm talking about Christians who
are in the Genesis 6 space, Nephilim space,
who've been red pilled, so to speak,
still having a hard time.
Are having a hard time because they were very comfortable with the idea of all of this just being demonic.
Right.
Because there's a lot of guys out there who don't really know anything about ufology who are saying that this whole thing is just demons, a masquerade of demons. Even people who I highly respect.
But you could say it's demonic evil. Demons, no.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys out there, like, again, who I highly respect, like Hugh Ross, who is a astrophysicist, brilliant astrophysicist. And Hugh has a very different perspective on Genesis. He has a long creation history perspective, the ages of creation. So he would push the creation of Adam way back into the distant past and the universe at 4 point whatever billion years it's at now. But he rejects outright the notion that there's any kind of extraterrestrial anything or aliens or anything like that. And he just glibly dismisses the whole thing as demons. So that position is held by a lot of Christians.
I love this conversation because I wish maybe one day I'll be able to sit down and have a conversation with Timothy Alberino or even the Blurry Creatures podcast, because I'm not well versed compared to them. I could bring a perspective from the typical Christian, because I would say most of them are like demonic entities, or I wouldn't even say, because it depends what you think of even what demons are. Because if you go back from the Jewish customs of what demons are, a lot of them thought that it was dismembered Nephilim spirits. Like they didn't know where to go after they died. The spirits of the Nephilim. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case or that has like the perfect biblical grounding for it. But again, there's a lot of fallen angels that I don't know if they're necessarily demons, but they are rebelling against God. So maybe there's a distinction. Just because they're not demons doesn't mean they're not good either.
I'd say the majority of Christians that I interact with, but as soon as you have crash retrievals in bodies, that explanation doesn't work anymore. And this film, as I said earlier, it concretizes the idea that we have crash retrievals and bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I said, furthermore, that there's a group inside of government comprised of evangelical Christians who are blocking efforts to disclose this information to the American public.
Can we talk a little bit, because I don't think we've covered the Collins Elite a whole lot on the show. It's a group of Christians, but like, how long has this been going on? Who is involved in this Collins Elite group? I guess my question for that is this where we get a lot of people that just talk about Project Bluebeam? This is all holograms. This is all government deception. This is all meant to, for you to focus over here, but something else is going on over here. I mean, who are these people? How long have they been doing what they've been doing?
What do you do, Luke? It's the modern world. How do we find a good doctor?
Well, we got to get up to modern world speed. Join us by using ZocDoc, because
the so-called Collins Elite, this really came forward in Nick Redfern's book. I can't remember the title of it, but Nick Redfern, who's a ufologist, wrote a book, and I'm sure the title will pop into my head randomly here as I'm talking, as is often the case. And he wrote about this secret group inside of government who are specifically evangelical Christians who are convinced that, as I said earlier, the UFO phenomenon isn't just demonic, it's literally demons manifesting, and that to interact with it is akin to witchcraft, is akin to divination, something on that level, right? That's the idea. So they feel like they're protecting the public from a deception.
That reminds me of Ron Wyatt's wife. And she was talking about her testimony, how she used to be really into spirituality and the supernatural or whatever. And then she's like, when she got married to Ron Wyatt, she was riding in the car and she saw these lights up in the sky. And she's like, wow, look at that. And then apparently Ron Wyatt's like, don't even look at it. Those are demons trying to completely persuade you and deceive you. I would love to know what Timothy Alberino's viewpoints are on Chris Bledsoe, because he's going to bring up that some people have had some good experiences with these beings and then ended up getting saved or becoming a Christian or a pastor or whatnot. But Chris Bledsoe will say he got healed, completely healed. And this being that he talks to is only here to help. But I would say the distinction is it has to align with Scripture. If they're here saying something else, that is not of God. If they're contradicting with what the Bible says, I would be concerned.
So as I've always said about the Collins Elite, I do believe this group exists. I don't know that they're very organized, and I don't think that they would call themselves the Collins Elite. I suspect they're much more loosely organized than Redfern thinks. But I've always said that I think they have good intentions. Lou Elizondo's confronted them directly, or they've confronted him more accurately, and they basically told Lou and Jay Stratton, stop looking into this. Stop this. We know what this is. This is demons. And they asked Lou, have you read your Bible lately? And Lou said, I don't understand. These are demons. Stop looking into this. So I think what you have here is zeal without knowledge. You have these individuals who are zealous, who are, I would say, sincere.
Yeah.
Christians. I would also probably say superstitious, and who believe that shielding the eyes of the public from the realities of the UFO phenomenon is somehow godly. And I would say the opposite is true. I would say that the obfuscation of the truth is ungodly.
Yeah.
And that they're not helping the American populace by attempting to impede disclosure. And so here's a
Yeah, I don't think the Bible ever does that either. It doesn't tell you things don't exist. It says don't participate in them. It doesn't say that forms of witchcraft aren't real. And obviously you could argue that having knowledge of all these things and then being told not to do it, it's more of a mature adult way of telling your kid or telling people what not to do or what to do. I think, we grew up in church where all the times it just, everything was shielded from you. Then you get to a certain age and you get access and you go crazy, right? And I think that these people are going to run into the ancient aliens content at some point, and then they could.
Yeah. And I think that more and more things will come out pointing to real evidence, making this reality. And if Christians spoke into this more instead of hiding from it, that could be an amazing testimony, amazing way to preach the gospel.
People have walked away from Christianity because they don't have the information. Then they have an encounter or something, and then they go, well, this changes everything. But you're kind of on the front lines of trying to help Christians understand that it's more. I guess one of my questions for you then would be, when did you start to think, what happened for you to go, as a Christian, this is not demons, this is something else? Where were you at when that happened?
I was sitting next to Gary Stearman at Prophecy Watchers. Years ago, I was there doing an interview for a film that Steve Quayle and I were producing. And Gary was off camera relating to me his encounter with the UFO, which you guys have featured. He's come on your show, which I found to be deeply compelling. And Gary believes that these weren't just like benevolent aliens or something. He believes these were angels.
Yeah.
And they saved his life. Not only did they save his life, it was that incident that changed the course of his life, because when he ascended into the heavens in his airplane, he had no intention of being, that day, he had no intention of being a Bible teacher. By the time he landed, he knew. He knew that he was supposed to be a Bible teacher because of that encounter with those beings in the craft. It was that life-altering, career-altering for Gary. It wasn't just an interesting, fascinating experience. And so
what was his
I
name?
often use this term because I think it's appropriate. The theater in my mind was being rearranged.
So were you kind of agnostic to aliens? Or
No, I had not yet contemplated the idea that both the good guys and the bad guys are utilizing technology. I think I was still thinking about this topic from a supernaturalist perspective. And I don't like the word, as everyone knows, I don't like the word supernatural because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, most people on our show now are saying that. It's more and more like,
It's meaningless. It's a nothing word. It doesn't describe
So you
anything.
believed in UFOs, you believed in aliens, but you just were nowhere to stick it? You didn't know where to put it?
I had just simply not contemplated that angels are operating physical technology. And when Gary told me his story, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, it was so foreign to my thinking. I had embraced the reality of the UFO phenomenon and the gray aliens and everything like that. And I never thought that this was a supernatural phenomenon or a spiritual phenomenon. I always knew it was physical because of the abduction material, which I was well versed in by this time. But when Gary told me the story of how these two, essentially what he believes are angels, I think he assumes there was more than one in the craft, saved his life and set him on the course to preach the gospel as a serious student of the Bible. I realized in that moment that I was not thinking rationally about the kingdom of heaven. And that created a cascade of events. And as I said, it rearranged the theological furniture in my head. And
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like I said, I wonder what his thoughts are on Chris Bledsoe. So that makes me interested because I want to watch Gary's testimony now. And I'm going to do that in another video, so stay tuned. But fascinating. Are all spiritual beings demons? No, we know that. We know that they're good spiritual beings. We know that angels are interacting with us all the time, even without us knowing.
Grapple with the idea that the kingdom of heaven is a functional kingdom, and that angels they must develop and use technology. So, in other words, they're not all that different than we are. Is a civilization.
But then you have a lot of Christians say that they would say, well, the fallen angels are the bad ones using the UFOs. What's the difference between a fallen angel and an alien?
Depends on the context. So, a fallen angel, quote unquote fallen angel, is an extraterrestrial. They're not from the earth. They're from somewhere else in the universe, or however you would like that. You can say, well, they're just interdimensional beings. Okay. Well, they're still extraterrestrial. It doesn't matter. They're not from here. I don't care where you think they're from. They're not from here. That's clear, biblically speaking. And so, therefore, they are by definition extraterrestrial. That's all that extraterrestrial means. A being whose provenance is not planet Earth. Okay. So, if you ask me, are angels extraterrestrial? I'd say absolutely, they're extraterrestrial. Are angels aliens? Well, are they us? Are they human? No. Okay, so they're alien.
Yeah.
Now, I don't like that designation because it conjures up pop culture ideas about aliens. But they are, technically speaking, they're not us. Anything that's not us is, by definition, alien to us. But what happens is people automatically conflate in their minds a gray alien with an angel, which I think there's an important distinction there. The angels, as I've said many times on your show, I consider the angels to be a race. They're an angelic civilization. They pre-exist us.
So when you're talking to people in this space about aliens, are they particularly thinking like grays?
You mean the controversy? You mean the Christians having a hard time digesting this stuff? Is that the audience you're referring to, or just people in general?
Just like people in the UFO space.
In the UFO space, you have the traditional
when they say
view.
aliens, like what are they thinking?
Well, today you have a lot of people who are in the UFO space who are new to it, and who are not versed in any of the material, who aren't versed in the decades of very good, competent research on this topic, where a lot of the questions have been answered. Like, it's like people who are trying to learn the history of America, say, or they're interested in the history of America, but only going back to 2020.
Yeah.
Right.
So they don't have any historical background.
Yeah.
They're just jumping in 2020, and they think the whole thing began with COVID-19.
Yeah.
So that's how the UFO, a lot of these newcomers to the UFO community are. Their roots in ufology only go back to the hearings.
Or Chris Bledsoe or something, right?
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Or Joe Rogan talking about UFOs.
Yeah. What is he going to say? I wish he would address. I've never heard him talk about Chris Bledsoe.
Podcast or American Alchemy, that podcast, something like that in that vein. That's their depth of ufology. But there's this entire history behind all of this where a lot of the questions have already been answered. We already know the answers. We know the answers because of people like the phenomenal researcher Leonard Stringfield, who for decades ago was writing about the crash retrieval program.
Yeah.
People like Stanton Friedman,
John Mack,
Dr. David Jacobson, Dr. David Jacobs, Carla Turner, in regard to the abduction phenomenon itself. A lot of these old school UFO researchers who, as I said, have already, I think, drawn the right conclusions about the phenomenon based on the research, based on the data. But today, you have a whole host of newcomers who, because they don't have that background, they haven't familiarized themselves with these people's work.
Yeah.
They are trying to answer the questions that are already answered, and they're doing it with all these newfangled ideas.
I was trying to get to the Christian hang-up is aliens or fallen angels. That's all. They put those together.
That's a trope. That's right.
But I think to your point, though, I think it's what with Gary Stearman, right? We had an episode 238. Like, that busts a hole in everything because you have a man that's saved by a UFO whose trajectory of his life changes to spreading the gospel based upon being saved by UFO.
Yeah.
So if you're saying these are all fallen angels and it's all demonic,
A deception.
right? Well, people would say that, you know,
Yeah.
I think people can get scared by demonic things and they could change their life, but this is not a scare. This is a
positive
saving.
outcome.
Yeah, it's a positive outcome. When you have to put that in the mix and say, this guy had this story forever, didn't tell it publicly for a long time, but he has this whole encounter that with something that's benevolent in an unidentified flying object that saves his life, and the trajectory of his life changes, right? Not because he's scared, but because he gets saved. And you have to throw that and say, how do we, if your hypothesis is all demonic, these are all demons, that doesn't fit. It doesn't work, right? And that's just one of a bunch of things I know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. That is absolutely fascinating, guys. I think that they brought up a very good case. I don't think everything is a demon. I don't think everything that we encounter is a demon, or whether or not it's a fallen angel or it's some angelic being. I think it honestly just depends. Like, I don't think that Muhammad encountered a demon. I think he probably did encounter an angel that rebelled against God, though. Not an angel, a spiritual being that rebelled against God to bring a false gospel and deceived him. That could be the case. And also, we can just come to the realization that we don't know everything. There's a lot of things that we do not know, and there's a lot of unknowns. I think the Bible has a lot of answers to all of these things, which is very, very important the more these things come out. So we need to be ready. Yeah. So I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below. That is for sure. It's a very, very fascinating conversation. Yeah, guys. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And I'm going to be reacting to the Gary Stearman video and his testimony. I'm excited. Anyway, guys, have an amazing day and God bless.